Hello everyone, my name is Phawx. This is going to be my review on the PocketGo S30. Thank you very much to BitBoy for sending this out to me for review. If it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't have this device to begin with. Having said that, there was a bit of an ordeal in getting this device. They had shipped it to the wrong address in Manhattan. It took weeks before I even realized that happened. They told me to go find it. I had to go track it down. Long story short is I did get it, but I only got it roughly about 3 weeks ago. I've been putting in a little bit of time with this device for the past 2 to 3 weeks in the little pockets of time that I have available to me. When I've been back and forth testing other devices, I've been putting in a little time on this. Overall, before I get into the build quality and all the other bits of the device, I really want to just kind of show why I do not recommend this device, and I'll show you very quickly right here. So let's go ahead and power this device on. I am using Retro Game Core's add-on pack, so you can kind of see this if we cycle through it. This is the recommended pack to do it. Even BitBoy themselves have emailed me and told me to do it to improve my experience, and overall it is a streamlined process. The UX is nice and clean and universal throughout. Performance is good through a lot of different emulators, so overall a great experience in terms of performance and UX. However, there is one very clear problem with the device, and I'll get to it right now. Alright, so this is basically the problem, and it actually shows up in fighting games as well, and I couldn't really put my finger on it. I tried opening up the device and taking a look at the controls themselves. That wasn't it. The problem really is with buffering the inputs, so we can see it very clearly here. Now, let's see it on a device that doesn't have this problem. Not a turbo button. Overall, that is basically the crux of the situation on why I cannot recommend the PocketGo S30. It is fundamentally flawed at a hardware level. The inputs for the device are being buffered in such a way that they're not streamlining all of the events through, and you have a staggered sequence of events happening. This also translates to other types of games, like in Tekken, when you have to press these two buttons to do a throw. You won't be able to throw. It's almost impossible in Tekken 3 to perform a throw command. In Street Fighter, it's really hard to just throw a dragon punch. I just wanted to get that out of the way of this review right now, because this is the beginning of the review. I can't recommend this device, even though the pricing on the device is extremely attractive and the performance is really good for what it is. So let's go, without further ado, let's just start talking about build quality. Now, there are a few things to talk about here. Now, the screen itself is an IPS screen. It is a very good 3.5-inch display. The viewing angles for IPS aren't the best that I've seen. However, there is very little backlight bleeding going on, so it's a mixed bag of a display in terms of being good in one part and bad in others. Overall, it's a fine display. With the speaker is a mono speaker, and it gets pretty loud and clear for what it's worth being a mono speaker. That's not too bad. Overall, the design aesthetics of the device, it is a Super Nintendo controller for all intents and purposes, but it's almost like you told someone what a Super Nintendo controller was, and then they copied bits and parts of other people copying it. It's a bit unfortunate that the fundamental flaw of the controller with regards to inputs is so flawed, because the D-pad actually does feel really good when using it. It does use a membrane underneath to press down, so in terms of authenticity, it does feel really good. Probably one of the better Super Nintendo D-pads I've felt, along the same lines as an SN30, and as you can see even from the triggers, they even copied what the SN30 is, but somehow managed to do this wrong. There are rubber membranes on the back, and I can show you that on the when we open up this device. There are two membranes right here that these are pushing down into. That feels kind of gross and actually doesn't feel all that great. It is running an all-winter trip, and there is dedicated RAM to it, so performance-wise, overall it's pretty good. There is a 10 watt-hour battery. By my calculation, I played a PlayStation game which will engage the GPU on the all-winter chip as well, and that got 5 hours of gameplay. So effectively, you're looking at 2 watts for total system power when we talk about LCD brightness at full, speaker volume at full, and running a PlayStation game. So we're using CPU and GPU at the same time. And to consume 2 watts entirely per hour, that's really, really good. Performance-wise, it works very well as well. So unfortunately, there's a lot to like about this device. Specifically, just speaking from a performance screen aspect size ratio, it's a really solid device for $60. However, outside of the D-pad, we have a Switch-like analog nub, which is fine, and for PSP emulation, which is kind of iffy in terms of how much performance you're going to get out of that. It's going to be a mixed bag. Some games will play well, some games won't play well at all. The D-pad really is quite nice. BitBoy did a fantastic job on the D-pad itself. However, again, because of those input issues, I'm not really sure why you care. For the face buttons are a weird thing as well. So they're all dome styled, and they're fairly PAL style dome face buttons. The problem is that the spacing of the buttons are actually a bit smaller than traditional US Super Nintendo buttons, but they use the same coloring scheme, but the PAL styled buttons, it's just a big old mixed bag of, I don't know what's going on really. It's all over the place, to be frank. Also, I'm not really a fan of the aesthetics of the controller game handheld thing by itself. I don't know why they went with this particular layout. I don't really like it in particular. I don't think the Super Nintendo controller itself is ergonomic to begin with. So if you're going to have something that looks alien insofar as being a handheld, why would you put a Super Nintendo controller on it? Why wouldn't you just, put grips on the back of here? I mean, I don't really understand it. It's not really all that great to pocket in this particular configuration. It's not. So why? I don't know. I don't really get it in terms of why they would do it. Maybe if you were just looking at this to play Super Nintendo games, fine. But there are so many things that do not translate. This is very much a simulacrum of a Super Nintendo controller. The D-pad is fantastic. The face buttons are way off. These L2 and R2 aren't very good, and the bumpers effectively are fine, but they're not going to be reminiscent of a Super Nintendo controller either. What I found myself doing is using L2 and R2 as almost finger guards, finger rails to just kind of rest my fingers on. Overall, it's okay. The select and start buttons are actually pretty authentic, I would say, to a traditional controller. They have a very hard rubber feel to them, and pressing down is rather difficult. So in terms of build quality overall and how it feels, it's very much a mixed bag for me. Overall, I don't like it. It's got interesting things, but this isn't for me. Along the top, we have the power button, and with Retro Game Core's unified UX and all fixings, this will be the main menu button, and that is really nice throughout all emulators. So when you're going to jump into an emulator, any game that you jump into, the only thing you have to do inside everything whenever you want to take a look at anything is, once it loads up, you just press the power button at the top, jumps you straight into a universal looking menu. Very clean, very easy. At the top, we have USB-C charging. It took me 2 hours to charge this device. It's worth noting that only a 5-volt, 1-amp charger worked for me here. So 5 watts in, and it's a 10-watt battery, so it takes around 2 hours, 2-ish hours to charge completely. We have the volume rocker here. Wish this was a potentiometer, but it's fine as buttons. On the bottom, we have the very obviously blue button to be that it's on. This will start blinking blue when the battery is low. When you're charging, this turns red. When it's finished charging, it just turns off. That's it. So it's just red and blue. We have the 3.5mm audio jack, the micro SD card expansion, and then the mono speaker right here. That is pretty much the entire bit for the build quality of the PocketGo S30. Right now, let's go into taking a look at performance of emulators and ROMs, and then we'll go straight into the end of my conclusion for this device. Alrighty, so this is going to be the conclusion of my review for the PocketGo S30. Very quickly, you could see that in a few of the game demos, performance-wise, it's actually really good, especially for the asking price of $60 for this device. The all-winner chip in here is really good for what the performance gets us. However, as evidenced by Metal Slug, as evidenced by even the Tekken gameplay when I was trying to do the throw mechanic by pressing these two buttons at the same time, just doing a simple Dragon Punch is difficult. So fighting games is almost entirely excluded from your experience of playing on the PocketGo S30. There are some games that are still playable. In Megaman X3, you could see that I was able to hold down Y to charge Mega Man's Buster and still move around and jump at the same time, even double tapping for dashing. So there are indeed games still playable on the PocketGo S30. It's just that there will be cascading events when you are trying to play games and the buttons are not doing what you wish them to do, and there will be frustrations caused from that. Ultimately, I can't recommend the PocketGo S30 for those reasons. If BitBoy can send a firmware update to fix that particular thing, I can then begin to recommend this device. But up until that point, I'm going to say that you should avoid this device. Even though the performance is great for $60, it really isn't worth it just yet. I would really just say go for other devices, especially ones that have Wi-Fi included. If that's not your bag, I can understand, but potentially wait for newer devices. As always, guys, thank you for your time, and thanks for watching.